SPD, Reckoning and Reform, is made possible with the support of the Gifford Foundation and the Pulitzer Center.
Another difficult night of violence for the city of Syracuse and the police department. A shooting on the near Westside has now left 9 people injured, one in critical condition.
So now I'm running, and as I'm running, right in front of me is another shooter coming this way. So now I'm in the center of, like I stated, a battlefield. My friends grabbed me, threw me to the ground, and I remember one of my friends literally hovering his body over me because I kept trying to get up. Because all I could think of is, where's my sister? Where's my cousin? Where's my friends? And I'm trying to push up, and I'm like, no, and he's like, Nitch, just lay down, just lay down. And I hear everyone just screaming, get down, get down. So I'm able to squeeze out. I get up, try to walk again, gunshots again. What I seen was like something I've never seen before in my life, never I wanted to see. I seen a young man shot in his leg, screaming for help. I seen a young woman, we don't even know if she was shot or what. She was just laying there, blood coming out of her face. She was scared, she didn't know what to do. Then I seen an unresponsive young man. So of course, that's where my attention went. So now I'm on the phone with 911 trying to direct an ambulance to him, because now I've surveyed the entire park, and I see that he's the most critically injured. So I ran, and when I ran, I seen Joe Comiscio. And when I seen Joe Comiscio, who's a sergeant in the police department, I recognized him. I said, Joe, I need your help. There is a young man over there that's unresponsive. He said, okay. Him and a crowd of individuals ran over. Then I seen an ambulance, a paramedic. I said, listen, this young man is unresponsive. She said, take me to him. We ran over to him. At that time, this is where community and the police work together. And when I say they work together, because you had family and friends screaming because they see this young man as unresponsive, and they're grabbing him and they're wanting to get to him, and the police are just saying, let the paramedics do their job, let the paramedics do their job, but they're not. And so Joe's looking at me and saying, I need your help. So what happened, we got them to push him back. We were able to get the paramedic in to get him on the gurney, and once we got him on the gurney, we were moving and we were doing what we needed to do. Later on, I did find out who the 17-year-old young man was, and that he, was critically injured. And 6 hours prior to him being critically injured, he graduated from high school.
You could have picked a lot of places to serve. Show Syracuse.
You don't deserve to be here!
Police reform is not a moment in time.
Stand firmly for justice. On our worst day, this is a noble profession.
One homicide is too many in this city.
People are running, and then you just hear gunshots.
There's a new day that's coming in the city of Syracuse.
Syracuse police are naming their 10th suspected gunman in the Rye Day shootout in June. Syracuse police have so far charged 9 suspects in the June 20th shootout by rival gang members at Performance Park during an annual party that drew hundreds of people on the city's west side. 17-year-old Shariel Ozario, who had just graduated from Corcoran High School, was killed.
I knew the young man who was killed. I coached his brothers, and all 3 of his brothers, in baseball. I was tough to go to a funeral of a kid who, just walked across the stage hours before and his life was taken.
I don't want a mother to go through what I'm going through right now, ever. I wouldn't even give this feeling to my worst enemy. It hurts like hell.
I can say this because I know his mom. I saw his mom last week, and she came up to me. She was incarcerated. So imagine your 14, 15-year-old brothers who don't have a job, who don't have any income. Your family's trying to help you the best that they can, and you survive. 8 years, and you get your brother to walk across that stage, and you're a child yourself, it was tough.
How did the decades of suspending students disproportionately, such that we are finally getting above 50% graduation rates? Which means, what happened to the other 50% of those students? And what we see happening is, when you don't have economic opportunity, you are funneled into the drug trade. This is a reality that we don't really want to address, because it's easier for us to say, well, I was poor and I didn't choose that, so therefore, shame on them. We have forced our young people into this community towards those directions. We have not provided an off-ramp for them.
How do we fix that?
That's the billion-dollar question. That's the billion-dollar question.
Part of the frustration that I think that we see with the police department and some of the things that maybe you're not getting is because you ask us to do too much. We recently had an article in the Syracuse.com paper that talked about our proactive initiatives that we have with marijuana enforcement, and they say that we have some cities have used these violent interrupters, and why haven't we tried that? Well, you notice that they did not offer a city that's successfully doing that. Then they say, well, we need to increase jobs, housing, and improve our education system. We agree. We just don't think that we should be doing it. Take those things somewhere else. And then we say, well, if we improve and increase a green space, then we can take away from people being able to hide their guns. Let's do facial interpretation at this time. You know how silly that sounds?
Kids are hurting. They're looking for a sense of belonging. They're looking for support, and they're looking for someone who cares about them potentially. And when in a gang, that's what they try to provide, that family-oriented, type of environment. But once you get in there, there's other things that are asked of you. And if you don't have people advocating for you or standing up for you, if they hear that someone's trying to recruit you, it's tough.
With the new raise the age policy, it's enabled older members to get a larger target group, to give them guns, to run the drugs, and just overall use them as tools.
So if I have you carry this gun, if I have you carry this dope or sell drugs, for you doing this, I'm going to give you some money. And, being a young kid who doesn't like a little bit of money in their pocket.
So the gangs are arming the kids?
Yes.
I was the worst. Yeah, I was the worst in elementary school. Got kicked out all the time, suspended, ISS, almost went to Beard, alternative school. My brothers are incarcerated. My brother's doing 37 years in prison, for shooting his girlfriend and, her mother because they spent his drug money. You know what I'm saying? My brother got shot 47 times in Florida trying to rob a bank. Okay? My mother died when I was 15. Never met my father. But my teachers, my coaches, my friends, they made sure that I stayed on the right track. That's why I'm here. And I want to show these kids that, hey, I grew up the same way. I had tough, no lights, didn't have anywhere to go. But my friends stepped up, and the people who didn't have to stepped up for me. And that's what we want to do for you.
He served previously as a deputy commissioner in the Parks Department. He's a native son of the city of Syracuse, but specifically when Pal, that conversation came around, said we need to target someone who will really look at this and get that moving. And so when I thought about it, I was like, Jimmy, would something like this interest you? And he was like, yeah, tell me about it, a little bit more about it. Chief was already there. He was, yeah, let's make this happen.
Here's a shocking statistic from the inner city. Over 60,000 New York City kids are walking around armed with powerful weapons. We know who they are. We know where they hang out. We even know where they got these weapons. Right here, at the Police Athletic League, where every day kids are being armed with the skills, the goals, the confidence they need for a lifetime of achievement. Please help arm a kid for life. The Police Athletic League. Go where others don't.
The Police Athletic League is a program that is put in place to build relationships with the police in the community through mentorship, through the arts, through trainings. It's a organization and program that's been around since the 1900s, and it's an effective tool that gets kids and officers in a space where they can build positive relationships.
Sports builds character, and it also builds friendships. I remember as a kid, I loved my dad. Any time I had to spend with my dad was precious because he worked 2 jobs. He had to keep bread on the table, and I developed close relationships with my baseball and basketball coaches, and that was within the Police Athletic League. They were all cops, and they were from the neighborhood, and we knew them.
I think the fact that the POW program is a national program and we're opening our own individual chapter gives us the opportunity to benefit from many victories that this organization has had nationally, and to be able to create those kinds of moments in our city.
What led to the RICO sweeps in 2003?
It's just the denial by some previous chiefs that there was a gang problem. I remember some chiefs publicly saying, we don't have a gang problem in Syracuse. And I looked at that, and it was in print on the record, and I said, oh my God, this is out of control.
The Racketeering-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Law, known by the acronym RICO, was written in 1970 that would address the way the mafia was operating in those days.
The U.S. Attorney at the time happened to be my former chief assistant, Glenn Sotheby. So our relationship was rock solid, and it was just a discussion that he and I had. Hadn't been done before in the United States. Now it's fairly common to use it. We had the perfect combination of Glenn as the U.S. Attorney, an aggressive prosecutor by the name of John Katko, who's now our congressman, and myself. And we focused on the violence as opposed to the drug, but unfortunately the two are synonymous. Drug trafficking is a violent business. So Glenn and I focused on the hardcore gun carrying, I call them narco-terrorists, who were not addicts. They weren't addicts at all. They were interested in spreading the poison to as many people as they could, but were also completely dominating, taking over, and terrorizing neighborhoods.
The gangs were each a separate entity. They controlled the territory, and they engaged in a pattern of incredibly violent conduct and drug dealing. And so it was a pattern of racketeering, and they were making a tremendous amount of money, and they were involved in a tremendous amount of violence. So I realized that it was one way to excise a gang all at once instead of piece by piece, and that's why we did it that way.
This is not an effort to get, nonviolent offenders off the streets of the city of Syracuse. This is an effort to take neighborhoods back.
It was basically, if you were in Gang A and you went in a Gang B's neighborhood, there was going to be shots fired, period. Didn't care who was around, didn't care what was in the way. The drug use in those areas was so acute that it became very lucrative to control that drug trade. So whoever controlled the drug trade in a certain area made an awful lot of money. And that's what they did, and that's why these territories became so important.
One day you show up for school and 30 of your classmates are missing. I just think it's overreaching. We're often in the city of Syracuse an example of being the first at doing something, not necessarily always one of the greatest examples, and this is one of them, where it devastated a neighborhood. It took fathers away from their children. It took sons away from their mothers.
The first gang case we did, violent crime in general and murders in particular dropped 40% in the next following year. And I'll never forget the article. It was a boot camp gang. And at the corner of Midland and Colvin, they had a picture of a mother that was being interviewed, and she says, I can now hear the church bells again instead of shooting. And I can take my kids to the store without feeling like I'm taking my life in my hands. So from both a statistical and an anecdotal standpoint, there's no question in my mind we made a difference.
It had an immediate impact that eventually receded once the sentences were served and once other people came in to fill the vacuum.
Waleed Betts, the owner, of All Money Spends Clothing. I've been at the clothing store here 5 years, but I've been doing All Money Spends going on like 7 years. You know, money isn't the root of evil. Not having it is. I mean, what that means to me, it's like you never seen people with money decide to go do evil things, more or less. People without it, you know what I mean? That's where the ideas, the negativities, for the most part, comes out. It'll make people do a lot of different things. I mean, I did things before, you know, not having money, so that's why I can identify with that. I grew up around here on the south side of Syracuse. I went to Lincoln, I went to Corcoran, I went to Henniger. You know, just grew up around here, just doing regular things, playing basketball, had hoop dreams, and, you know, then started gambling, and then, you know, got introduced to other things, you know.
Get introduced to?
You know, selling drugs and, you know, stuff like that. End up getting locked up for that. I couldn't believe that they were using the RICO charge on some young kids from, you know, from the south side. I mean, basically, this was a bunch of guys, a bunch of young kids that, you know, had a lot of misguided energy, you know, and we just did misguided things. You know, we ran the streets, you know, got into trouble.
I mean, literally, they were literally neighborhoods where you had to ask permission to walk in certain areas at night, where you would be afraid to wear certain colors in your clothing at night. That's not a community, that's not a city, and that's not right. You know, the joy of, you only get the joy of growing up once. And when I say joy, I'm referring personally to myself. But I look at kids today, some of whom I've prosecuted. They have no joy in their lives. They've never had joy. They never understood what it was like to just hang out on a corner, and every time you heard a car backfire, everybody ducks for cover. And that isn't right.
I was sentenced to 17.5 years in federal prison. I ended up serving 9 years, and then when President Barack Obama did the crack law, it took me down to 10 years and 10 months.
How much money were you and others in boot camp earning?
Like literally nothing. It was all like overstated, you know, because it just was overstated. Going through it, you don't understand it, but after it's over, you look back like, wow, like all of that for that, like, you know, it just was just, like I said, it was unbelievable. Like I was in like all those, you know, all those federal penitentiaries with a lot of guys that had life sentences. And, you know, and I knew I could do better. Like I really knew I could do better. You know, I didn't want to poison my community again.
Have you talked to Cacto since then?
I have seen him. I have seen him at the book bag giveaway, the annual book bag giveaway.
Two fellas are walking up to me, and when they were walking up to me, I'm like, oh boy, because the last time I'd seen them, they were being taken out of the courtroom in handcuffs. I do remember saying to both of them, good luck to you, and it wasn't personal.
It just was like, do you know who we are, type thing. And he like, and then he reflected on who we were.
And he took out his hand and he shook my hand and he said, thank you. And I was trying to understand why. And he said words to the effect, I can't remember exactly what he said, but basically, I was out of control back then, and, you know, you may have helped me save my life.
And then he just, you know, it just was like a moment like, wow. And then he just was like, asked us what we were doing more or less, and then I told him I was doing the clothing line, and we just told him all the good things that we were doing. I'm
incredibly proud of his strength, and I'm really proud because he is not shy about telling people what he stands for. He made it through, and he's doing okay, and I'm really proud of him.
My message is always positivity. Like I tell them what's behind the wall, like what's really going on. This is new for them to see, like somebody that they know actually like pushing forward and doing something. I just try to, you know, give them the real and inspire them.
The problems that we're facing, we've already done all the easy stuff. We've been to the moon. The only thing left, heavy lifting. Raising a family, heavy lifting. A child getting educated, coming out of poverty, heavy lifting. Finding a job when you have a criminal background, heavy lifting. People returning to our society with mental illness or substance abuse issues, heavy lifting. Stop coming to me with these cookie cutter, microwave, Easter Bunny ideas, and let's come up with substantive things where the police are not the only one facing the firing squad.
Neighbors in the Syracuse City School District debating the future of school resource officers. Members of the district meeting with a group, the People's Agenda on Policing. One of the group's demands includes removing SROs altogether. The group wants more school counselors, social workers, and support staff.
My first interaction with the school resource officers was in 1990 when I went to Fowler to be the administrative intern. And we had a great resource officer in the building, Officer Hay, who had a great relationship between the school, the students, the parents, and the community. He was a great person to talk to, a person that the students felt very comfortable with. I know that things have changed throughout the years, that there are more things going on in the community, but the presence of the police officers in the buildings at that time and continue to do helps establish a good relationship between the schools, the students, the police officers, and the community.
We want to talk about, in the last demand, school resource officers, superintendent, cost per SRO salary, $72,995. Cost per SRO including benefits, $98,138. Again, per person that we're sending to the suburbs, subsidizing the suburban sprawl at the expense of the city. What that means is, for 5 SROs, we could have had 13.34 teacher assistants, supportive staff.
When we deploy our police, it's often for things that are not legitimate law enforcement activity. We do not need them to be mentors for students in schools. Mentors should do that. Mental health therapists should do that. Counselors should do that. We should be giving those individuals, those entities, those organizations the budgeting to make those things happen.
I think the presence of officers in schools can create an environment where everyday bad behavior is now criminalized, and you're introducing children into the criminal court system well before they're ready or prepared. And it's a very dangerous step to take, because once a child becomes accustomed to the court system, it no longer fears them.
To just phase out the SRO totally, I think it would be a bigger issue, because eventually, if it's a violent situation where the police is needed in the building, then 911 is going to be called, and you're going to have officers who are not familiar with these particular students or with these student situations come into the building, and it's going to be very difficult for them to do their jobs properly.
We're not perfect in the schools, but I will tell you that when there were calls this past summer or last summer asking for the school resource officer to be removed, there was a significant, robust response from school administrators and parents that said that we do not agree with that. And many of the individuals who were calling for it, I question whether they even have kids in the school. But the people who are directly impacted by that did not agree with that assessment.
As far as taking money away from the program, if it's going to mean getting rid of the SRO, I don't agree.
There is a need for law enforcement to be present inside of high schools due to the increase in school shootings, due to the increase in violence inside the schools, due to different entities coming to schools and creating chaos.
I've thought a lot about police officers in schools, and like everything else, if I don't think that I myself am an expert on the subject, I seek out those that are. So I've had conversations with Superintendent Alisea and school board members. I've had conversations with students, and I've had conversations with police officers. And I think, unfortunately, given the conditions of today's society, especially as it relates to how easy it is for people to get their hands on a gun, I think that it's a necessary public safety measure to have armed police officers in our schools, not to create a police state, but simply to be there to protect our students. I do support police officers in our schools.
I am always welcome
the opportunity to engage in open dialogue on how can we work together to address the needs of the kids in the district and the needs that we have in our community.
Syracuse police are working without a contract. Is that affecting morale?
All sides believe the tentative deal would make the police department more competitive, but some worry the city just can't afford it.
Our approach in negotiating the police contract was to use it as a mechanism to address changes that needed to be made within the police department.
Thank you, Madam President. I have item 8A. It is local law. It approves the money for the Police Benevolent Association contract.
And the one thing that we heard more than anything is that people wanted police officers to live in the city. They wanted them to live in the community that they serve.
I'd like to introduce the law, but I would urge that people vote no on this item. In the simplest terms, we just don't have the money to pay for this contract.
Is the contract worth the increase in cost?
Very much so. I would just ask you, what's your safety worth?
SPD, Reckoning and Reform, is made possible with the support of the Gifford Foundation and the Pulitzer Center.